Good morning, everyone. It is game day. Wanted to take this opportunity to try something new. For those of you that have followed the channel for a while, you know that we've been trying to find a solution to recording the drivers meeting because we currently don't do that for a number of different reasons. So I thought what I could do is actually record a video for you on the notes that came out of the drivers meeting and some of the questions that were asked. So it is early in the morning here at Long Beach, and let's dive right into it. This was prepared by the judges. You should be seeing this file right now. All right, so one of the many things that was discussed in the drivers meeting was really what the judges were looking for and questions about Tandem in particular. Now that we've been through qualifying and we kind of understand what runs were scored high, say above 90, we understand what the lead driver needs to do. Now it's about certain situations that may come up or areas where you want to make a sacrifice because driver X, Y, and Z is doing something. So let's get into the lead driver goals first. So perform a 100-point qualifying line. Obviously, that is a tall order, but that is what the lead driver is supposed to be trying to do. And in particular, a chaseable lead run is something that has been heavily focused on. And the primary reason for that is because when a driver is in proximity, what the lead driver does in terms of mistakes plays a big role in what the effect can be to the chase driver. Following the momentum map. So we have two decel zones that have been registered by the telemetry data on a more than a sample size of cars. So we've seen all the cars run through, we've seen the new decel lights operate, and we know that there is a decel zone of a certain length at the initiation and also one at the last inside clip in and around that area. So we can expect cars to slow down there. That is also good preparation for the chase driver to understand what should be natural for the lead driver in those particular areas. The compromises for the lead driver is trying to essentially run away, running angle that is less than ideal. And so the speed is faster through the course, but it's not necessarily what the lead driver should be doing, given the fact that they have an unencumbered sight in front of them, and the chase driver is really trying to get the best possible opportunity to be able to run against that lead driver. Poor transition. So one way that was discussed about a poor transition is just a slow transition where you have a guy on your back bumper. He's expecting a transition of a certain kind. His spotter's been watching your runs, her runs all weekend long, and you do them slower than usual. What the judges are looking for is a quick rate to angle from one side of the block to the next on your transition so that the chase driver can anticipate that. And that also kind of falls into the getting away part, right? If you are doing things that are hard to predict in a bad sense, then it makes it much more difficult for the chase driver to be able to make those adjustments in what's physically possible for them in the car. So chase driver goals, we do allow the chase driver to initiate no later than the last initiation point. And that is a difference from many, many years past where they had to initiate with the lead driver. In this particular case, what we're trying to accomplish here is have the chase driver be able to get as close to the lead driver. And so sometimes a strategy of initiating a little bit later than the lead, but no later than the last initiation point is acceptable. And it's actually preferred because we want to see close tandem. So clearly, obviously, maintain close proximity. We are looking for the chase driver to match or better the lead car's angle. And that for me is always like a really strong point of difference, is to see if that driver is doing that, especially once they transition from one angle to the next. Is it clear that they've bettered the angle while maintaining the line? Some of the compromises that a chase can make would be cheating the line. So in terms of gaining proximity, this is one of the sacrifices or compromises that you can make. Let's just say that you feel that you're down on speed relative to another driver, so you're running a tighter line that allows you to keep proximity. That's going to be good in some sense, but if it's cutting the line too much and it's noticeable that you are making the course shorter for yourself, then that could be potentially a detriment, all other things being equal. And the same thing goes for angle. The less angle in the car, the quicker it's going to be. And so that allows you to gain proximity. And these are the things that when you add them all into the hopper at the end, could have a factor or play a role in the decision. The timing and a location of the initiation, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. They will give you, with no negative, a perfectly understandable approach in initiation can be that last standing cone. However, if you were to initiate with the lead driver and maintain proximity, that would be a benefit for you, because it shows that you can anticipate that driver's initiation, that you did it at the same time that he did. And in terms of mimicking, that is a benefit for the chase driver. So some drivers may consider, look, this guy's a little bit faster than me, I'm going to do a later initiation, and that will be acceptable. Or I'm going to raise the bar a little bit here, and I'm going to initiate with the lead driver and still maintain proximity. Of course, once that initiation happens, you're locked into the run, the transitions, and the timing of those transitions and overall driving compared to the lead car is what the focus is going to be from the judges. We've got our chicane, of course. The chicane is the same width that it always is at every round. We do allow the chase driver to leave the light whenever he would like, though that is somewhat risky. But the lead driver must use the chicane, cannot leave before the light goes off, and hitting any of the cones in the chicane will result in a strike, 3 strikes, and you're out. New for this year is that if the lead driver were to stall on the line, it is no longer an incomplete, it is just a strike. If a driver chooses to go single file initiation, these are the rules that are governing that particular positioning. So the front of the chase vehicle is not to surpass the rear of the lead vehicle until the lead vehicle has initiated. So that's about pacing the car down once the light has gone off. But the chase driver can position their vehicle anywhere behind the lead driver leading up into initiation. These are the decel zones that we talked about. This is actually a map that we made for fans if they were judging qualifying with us yesterday, you know, adding up the deductions, adding on the X factor, and coming to the total. Inside clip 1, historically, there's always crazy stuff that happens there because people are trying to gain speed from outside zone 3 to inside clip 1 to close the gap. Sometimes they cut it a little bit short. That's the only area on this track that we don't have a marker that is not sitting right on a wall. So that is always an area of importance as drivers are trying to close the gap coming into that final section. The finish line after you pass that inside clip is about 30 or 40 feet up on the wall. And we did see a few cars shut down before the finish line yesterday, and that resulted in an incomplete. So these are the incompletes in tandem for this round. Some of them carry over and are essentially the same for all rounds, but we do try to address individual areas, especially tires off, that would constitute an incomplete. So spinning out, opposite drift, an unchaseable lead. We'll talk more about that. A collision with another driver that's considered avoidable. So this would be basically like you induced almost intentionally an accident. A chase driver not intentionally chasing the lead driver. So that's kind of like a sandbagging rule. If you had an incomplete, the driver had an incomplete on the first run, and you stayed back, didn't challenge that driver, you could get a sandbagging violation. 3 consecutive restarts from the chicane or an official's call, performing an illegal pass. So the only place that a pass can be performed at this particular track is on inside clip number 1. And in general, all passes are only legal on inside clip. So if a lead driver were to blow off and go way outside of that inside clip, a chase driver was able to anticipate that. They could make that pass, perform it legally, and that would be an automatic incomplete for the driver that was passed. Not maintaining control across the finish line. This is, if you watched our other videos, you'll know that this is an area where we actually defined further and deeper what that means. So clearly spinning out is not having control, but also if you demonstrate a lack of control to finish the run, that can also be considered an incomplete. And then for this round, on the inside clip, on the painted area there, 3 tires off course would be an incomplete. These are the reminders that came about from the driver's meeting, initiated by the one at the latest, pointing in the right direction and a 2-move maximum. So that is something that has come about in recent years because we have seen drivers do more than 2 moves. And the reports back from the chase driver is that in terms of the predictability and their need to be able to get close on proximity, it's very difficult to anticipate what that lead driver is going to do if they're doing too many moves back and forth. So 1 move to initiation, 1, 2 is fine. Huge manjis down the front straight are not acceptable. And also stepped initiations would be a big deduction. Back on throttle early is super key at this. And we've seen huge differences in drivers after they initiate, letting it float out to a certain point in the decel zone and then getting back on throttle. The drivers that did well were those ones that did those 1-2 step initiations. And then immediately once they're at lock are back on throttle. Turk, Dean, Denofa, all really good examples of doing that correctly. E-brakes and other things like that, tools that the drivers have, obviously are tools in general, but overusage of those tools can be a negative, especially in tandem, as a chase driver is trying to make reasonable predictions about what you're going to do. Outside zone 3 is an area that has potential to be overblown, go too far, and you can pinch off the chase driver there. So they are looking for you to leave that outside zone. You'll see on the track a bunch of tire rubber where the outside portion of that line is, but there's also white lines on the far on driver's right that if you go past will be a big problem. And then don't park it at inside clip number 1. You know, we know that this is a decel zone, but all decels are not considered equal. We still want to see a flowy run through that part of the course. And that means not going from a high rate of speed to a low rate of speed while keeping angle in the car and essentially shutting it down at the inside clip so that the chase driver has nowhere to go. Maintain angle across the finish line. Yeah, this is basically like, don't shut it down too early, keep the throttle on, push it through the finish line, and you'll be fine. So there were some good questions. I wrote down a few. Some of them were pertaining to when a driver should pick up throttle after initiation. And essentially, it needs to be done more or less by the time that the decel zone ends on the track map. So if you see a driver that floats it out for a long period of time, especially if they have white wheels and you can see that they have the e-brake pulled, if they float it out longer than necessary because the run up was too fast and it induces a collision, it's going to be on the lead driver in that particular case. Another question that we had was about something that we already addressed, and this has to do with what constitutes parking it at inside clip number 1. We do have the new decel lights, and so we can see when it is triggered red, and we know that there are going to be areas inside clip number 1 to a certain point where you should be picking up throttle again and that light turning green. So even if you kept angle in the car, but you went from a very high rate of speed, let's say you overblew outside zone 3 and you had a big long e-brake pull, or you angled up the car in such a way that slowed it down too much for the chase driver to anticipate, where it would be treated as a mistake and not good driving, that can have an impact in who was at fault. Some other reminders for this event and questions that came up about the new rule with regards to if there is any contact on course that does not result in an incomplete, what does the 5-minute process look like? So once we verify that contact has happened to the vehicles, we will let them step aside, take a look at the vehicles, and it will be treated just like any other competition timeout. So, you know, if you have a little rub up on your front bumper with somebody, you shouldn't be changing your tire pressure. You shouldn't be making adjustments to other parts of the car that are not tied to that contact, especially if it's just light and we're looking at something more along the lines of cosmetic as opposed to it actually being something that has been damaged on the vehicle. So let me know if you guys have any questions down below. I'm happy to answer these before we get started today, but that was pretty much like the general gist of the driver's meeting. It was pretty quick. We went through all of this. I wrote down most of the questions that pertain to certain categories and hopefully give you guys a good understanding and insight to what the judges are looking for and how the drivers are adjusting to the course so far. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.